Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive.
Yeah.
Today we're going to be looking at this
Okay.
idea that's been floating around, that even though we have more access to information than ever before,
Right.
thanks to search engines like Google,
hmm
we might actually be becoming less informed overall.
That's interesting.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, it is a bit of a paradox, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, the sheer volume of information online is it's mind-boggling.
Right.
But this author that we're going to be talking about today makes this really interesting argument that how we access all that information has changed,
Hmm.
and maybe not for the better.
Right, and that's where this Roach Motel analogy comes in.
Ah,
Yeah, those things are so easy to get into, but
yeah.
almost impossible to escape.
Yeah.
Definitely got my attention when I saw that.
It's a very striking analogy.
Yeah.
The author is arguing that Google might have transitioned away from being this open and neutral platform that we all thought it was for accessing information into something that's almost like designed to keep users trapped within their ecosystem. So it's less about connecting you to the vastness of the internet and more about keeping you on Google itself.
Okay, so think about it. How often do you actually click through to those second or third page results on Google?
Yeah.
Or even venture beyond those first few links?
Right.
I know I'm definitely guilty of staying in that top section most of the time.
Me too, and that's exactly the behavior the author is highlighting,
Yeah.
to understand how we got to this point. I think it helps to kind of take a step back and look at the early days of search engines,
Okay.
back when, things were a little simpler.
Yeah.
They were more like those train stations the author describes.
Okay.
Just simply providing access to the trains,
Okay.
the websites in this case going everywhere.
Right.
And there was this sense of openness and diversity
Mm.
with no single entity controlling the flow of information.
Right. It was like the Wild West of information back then.
Yeah.
So much to discover. So many different perspectives.
Yeah.
It felt revolutionary at the time.
It really was a dramatic shift in how we accessed knowledge.
Mm.
But as Google gained dominance,
Right.
it seems like their approach may have changed.
Okay.
The author is arguing that now Google is prioritizing their own content and their own services, essentially building walls within that once open landscape.
Right. It's almost like they've gone from building roads to building fences.
Yeah,
And that brings us back to this Roach Motel visual
right.
the author uses,
Yeah.
which I have to admit is a little unsettling, to say the least.
It is. It's a provocative image, but I think it's effective.
Okay.
It really underscores this idea that Google might be deliberately making it difficult to leave their platform, to explore those diverse external sources that we used to rely on so much.
Right. So then that raises some important questions about why they would make this shift.
Yeah, why would they do that?
Yeah, what's the motivation here? Well, the author actually lays out 4 key reasons.
Okay.
And honestly, they all make a lot of sense when you consider Google's business model. First up is ad revenue.
Okay.
The longer they can keep users on their platform, the more ads they can show them.
Right.
Which means more money for Google.
It's a classic case of follow the money.
Yeah.
User engagement equals revenue.
Right. And then there's all the data they collect, on our search habits, our preferences, even our location.
Yeah.
And this allows them to do things like personalize the content and the ads,
Right.
making them even more effective and enticing.
It's a cycle.
Yeah.
The more data they collect, the better they can target us.
Right.
Which keeps us engaged and coming back for more.
Right.
It's a very effective strategy.
But what about the impact on us as users?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I mean, it's one thing to see a few personalized ads,
Right.
but what about how this affects the information we're exposed to?
Yeah, that's where the third reason comes in. Controlling the narrative.
Okay.
By prioritizing their own content and services, they can potentially steer users away from competitors or information that doesn't really align with their interests.
This example the author gives with Reddit, I think, really brings this home.
Okay. Yeah.
Apparently, Google now prioritizes their own shopping platform over links to the same products on Reddit, even when Reddit might offer more diverse options or better deals.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a really clear illustration of how this Roach Motel strategy can play out in a very real way.
Yeah.
It's not just theoretical.
Right.
It's impacting our online experience right now.
Okay. And then the final reason the author highlights is that this approach helps Google push users towards their own suite of products and services,
Okay.
which further solidifies their dominance.
Yeah.
We're talking about Google Maps, Google Flights, Google Shopping, like
Right. They've got a finger in every pie.
they really do.
It's a brilliant strategy, if a little concerning,
Yeah.
for market domination. By becoming the default for everything,
Right.
from search to navigation to shopping,
Right.
they create this powerful ecosystem that's very hard to escape.
Right.
But the question is, at what cost?
And that leads us to like the potentially alarming consequences of this Roach Motel model.
Right.
The author argues that it could like significantly limit our exposure to diverse perspectives and ultimately hinder our ability to think critically.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this?
The implications are definitely worth considering.
Okay.
I mean, if we're only being exposed to a narrow range of information that's been filtered through Google's algorithms and priorities,
Right.
how can we truly engage in informed decision-making?
This is all feeling very matrixy all of a sudden.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Like, are we just being spoon-fed information that fits a certain narrative
Right?
rather than being given like the full picture?
Yeah.
It's kind of unsettling.
It is. And it really underscores the need for us to be more critical and discerning in how we consume information online.
We can't just passively accept what's presented to us.
Right. And speaking of passively accepting information,
Uh-huh.
the author actually dives into this fascinating example that really got me thinking.
Okay.
They talk about searching for information on the collapse of the Roman Empire,
Okay.
and they compare the AI-generated summary that Google provides to a detailed entry from the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica.
Oh, wow.
What struck you about this comparison?
I think what I found most interesting was just the stark contrast in depth and nuance.
Okay.
The AI-generated summary, while it seemed really convenient, felt very superficial. It lacked the context, the analysis, and the multiple perspectives that the Encyclopedia Britannica entry provided.
It made me wonder if we're sacrificing true understanding for the sake of convenience and speed. Are we becoming so accustomed to quick, bite-sized answers that we're losing our ability to delve into complex topics and grapple with different interpretations?
It's a crucial question to consider.
This reliance on these AI-generated summaries, especially when they lack context and potentially present a single, possibly biased viewpoint, it could lead us further and further away from informed decision-making and critical thinking.
This all raises a lot of concerns.
It does.
But is there hope?
Yeah, good question.
Can we break free from this potential Roach Motel
Yeah.
and reclaim our autonomy as informed citizens?
Hopefully.
We'll explore that and more when we come back
Okay.
for part 2 of this deep dive.
Yeah, it's a valid concern if Google is becoming this, Roach Motel of information.
Right.
How do we break free?
Yeah.
I mean, we can't exactly unplug from the internet, can we?
Right. Search engines are so fundamental to everything we do these days.
Right.
But you're not suggesting that we ditch Google altogether, are you?
Not necessarily. No, these tools still have value,
Okay.
but I think the key is in becoming more conscious and discerning users.
Okay.
We need to be aware of the potential biases at play and not simply accept the results as gospel.
So not taking everything at face value.
Exactly.
It's like being shown a curated museum exhibit. You still need to think critically about what's being presented and why.
Exactly. And just because Google puts something at the top of the search results doesn't automatically mean that it's the most accurate or comprehensive perspective.
Right.
We need to be willing to dig deeper, explore different viewpoints.
That makes sense. It's about retraining ourselves to be more active participants in the search process, not just passive consumers of whatever pops up first.
Yeah.
Do you think that's where this whole information athlete concept comes in?
Absolutely. We need to train our minds to be more agile, more discerning, and more resistant to manipulation.
Okay.
And one of the best ways to do that is by diversifying our sources of information. Don't just rely on Google for everything.
So what are some other avenues we should be exploring?
Well, for more in-depth research,
Okay.
academic databases like JSTOR or PubMed, even Google Scholar can be incredibly valuable.
Okay.
And a lot of libraries offer free access to these resources.
Right. So you don't need to be a student or anything to benefit.
Exactly right.
Okay. That's good to know.
Then there's independent media,
Okay.
international publications, even sources that might challenge your existing viewpoints.
It's about getting the full picture. Not just the one that's been pre-filtered for us, right?
Exactly. Remember that analogy of the early internet being train stations with trains going everywhere?
Yeah.
We need to rediscover that sense of exploration
Okay.
and be willing to venture beyond those first few Google results.
This reminds me of the author's point about expert opinions.
Right.
They mention that even professionals in various fields are starting to notice this decline in the quality of search results.
Yeah.
It's not just like a feeling.
Right.
It's something that's being observed across different sectors.
Right. It's a really important point because it lends credibility to this whole argument that something is shifting in the way that information is presented and accessed online.
Right.
It's not just a subjective perception. There's a real concern here that the quality of information is being impacted.
So besides diversifying our sources,
Right.
what are some practical steps we can take to become more savvy searchers?
I think developing our critical thinking skills is crucial.
Okay.
Whenever you come across information online, just ask yourself some basic questions.
Right.
Who created this? What's their agenda?
Right.
What evidence supports their claims?
Sure.
Is this information corroborated by other sources?
So it's like becoming our own fact checkers.
Exactly. Don't just accept things blindly. Cultivate a healthy sense of skepticism and a willingness to question everything you read online.
That makes me think about those AI-generated summaries we were discussing earlier.
Right.
If we're not careful, we could end up in a situation where we're just blindly trusting these algorithms.
Right.
Without even questioning the information that they're providing.
It's a valid concern.
Yeah.
AI can be a powerful tool,
Right.
but it's important to remember that algorithms are created by humans and can reflect human biases.
Right.
We still need to engage our critical thinking skills and not outsource them to technology.
And speaking of bias, how do we become more aware of our own preconceived notions when we're searching for information?
Yeah.
It's so easy to just gravitate towards sources that confirm what we already believe.
It's a natural tendency, but we need to actively challenge those biases. Seek out diverse perspectives, even if they make you uncomfortable.
Right.
Step outside of your echo chamber and engage with different viewpoints.
It's like building a more well-rounded understanding of the world.
Exactly.
But it also raises a challenge.
Yeah.
With so much information out there, how do we know which sources to trust?
That's where information literacy comes in.
Okay.
It's about learning how to evaluate sources, assess credibility, and identify potential biases.
So it's like becoming information detectives.
Exactly. We need to develop our investigative skills and be willing to dig a little deeper to uncover the truth.
And this is where the author's call for transparency becomes so crucial.
Right.
If platforms like Google were more transparent about their algorithms and how they prioritize content, it would empower users to make more informed decisions.
I completely agree. Transparency is essential. Not just for Google, but for all platforms and sources of information.
Right.
The more we understand the mechanisms at play, the better equipped we are to evaluate information critically.
This is all so insightful, but it can also feel a bit overwhelming.
I understand.
I mean, we're all busy people.
Right.
Who has time to become an information athlete?
Yeah.
And fact check everything they read online?
You're absolutely right. It's about finding a balance. We don't need to become obsessed with scrutinizing every piece of information.
Right.
But we can develop habits and strategies to be more mindful consumers.
So maybe it's about picking our battles and focusing on the information that's most important to us.
Yeah.
If it's a topic we're passionate about,
Right.
or a decision that will have a significant impact,
Yeah.
Then we put in the extra effort to be informed.
That's a great approach.
Okay.
It's about being strategic and discerning with your time and energy.
Okay, so we've covered diversifying our sources, evaluating information critically,
Right.
being mindful of our own biases,
Yeah.
and developing those information literacy skills.
Right.
What else can we do to reclaim our power as informed citizens?
One final point I want to emphasize is the power of community and collaboration. We don't have to do this alone.
What do you mean by that?
Connect with others who share your values.
Okay.
Join online forums, attend events, support organizations that are fighting for a more open and transparent internet.
Okay.
We can learn from each other,
Right.
amplify credible voices, and hold those in power accountable.
So it's about moving beyond individual action and creating a collective push for change.
Exactly. Remember strength in numbers. When we work together, our impact is magnified.
Okay.
Individual actions matter.
Right.
But collective action can be a powerful force for creating a more informed and equitable information landscape.
I love that.
Yeah,
It's empowering to think that we have the agency to shape the future of the internet.
we do.
But before we wrap up this part of the deep dive,
Okay.
I want to revisit that thought-provoking question the author left us with.
Right.
If this trend continues, will we need an AI chatbot? Just to summarize the real meaning of what we find online.
It's a powerful question, isn't it?
It is.
Because it really gets to the heart of the issue.
Yeah.
Are we headed toward a future where we're so reliant on algorithms that we lose our ability to think for ourselves?
That's a sobering thought. And before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, where we'll explore some more practical tips and resources,
Right.
I want to leave our listeners with one final thought from the author.
Okay.
Remember, the technology exists.
Yeah.
Google knows this more than anyone. It just needs to prepare itself for the inevitable payback.
What do you make of that statement?
Yeah.
I think it's a powerful reminder that companies like Google are not immune to the forces of change. You know, they've built their empires on this promise of access to information.
Right.
But if they continue down this path of restriction and manipulation, they risk alienating their users and facing a backlash.
Yeah.
It's a warning, but it's also a call to action. We, the users, have the power to demand better.
So it's a reminder that we have agency, we have choices,
Right.
and we have a voice.
Exactly.
We'll explore how to use those effectively in the final part of this deep dive.
Okay, sounds good. Stay tuned. Okay, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive. And now that we've kind of explored the potential downsides of this Roach Motel model and how it might be like affecting us, let's shift gears a bit and talk about solutions.
Okay.
You know, you left us with this idea that we have agency and we have choices when it comes to like navigating the online world.
Yeah.
So where do we even begin?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it can feel really overwhelming to think about changing our online habits.
Right.
Especially when we're so accustomed to relying on certain platforms.
Right. It's almost like second nature to just type everything into Google without even thinking about it.
Exactly. But remember, Google isn't the only game in town. There are alternative search engines out there that prioritize privacy and offer a different approach to delivering search results.
Okay, like what? Give us some examples.
Well, DuckDuckGo is a popular option.
Okay.
They're known for not tracking your searches or storing your data.
Then there's Start Page, which actually uses Google's search results, but without all the tracking and data collection.
Okay.
So you're still getting access to that vast index of information, but with more privacy.
That's good to know. I'm already feeling a little bit more empowered just knowing there are options out there.
Good.
But what about those of us who aren't quite ready to abandon Google entirely?
Yeah.
Are there ways to be more strategic about how we use it?
Absolutely. Think of it like learning to speak the language of the algorithm by using more specific keywords searching within certain websites, or even adding terms like forum or discussion to your searches. You can often uncover more diverse and nuanced perspectives.
It's like hacking the system from the inside.
Yeah, kind of.
Figuring out how to get the results we're really looking for.
Exactly.
But what about going beyond search engines altogether?
Right.
Where else can we find reliable and insightful information?
One resource that I think often gets overlooked is academic databases.
Okay.
They are gold mines of in-depth research and analysis.
And many libraries offer free access to these resources, so you don't have to be a student to benefit.
Okay, that's great for deep dives into specific topics, but what about like staying informed on current events?
Right.
We can't all be reading academic papers all day long.
No, of course not. And that's where curating your news sources becomes crucial. Instead of passively scrolling through social media or relying on a single news outlet, actively seek out diverse perspectives.
So what does that look like in practice?
Read independent media outlets, international publications, and even sources that might challenge your existing viewpoints. The goal is to get a more holistic understanding of the issues, not just one narrow perspective.
This reminds me of something the author emphasized, understanding the motivations and biases of different sources.
Right.
It's like Media Literacy 101.
Exactly. It's about asking those critical questions. Who's funding this publication?
Right.
What's their editorial stance? What are their potential blind spots?
Once you start thinking critically about where your information is coming from, you'll be amazed at how much more discerning you become as a consumer of information.
This is all fantastic advice. But I can imagine it might feel a bit overwhelming for some people.
Sure.
I mean, we're bombarded with information from all sides these days.
Right.
It's hard to know where to even start.
That's understandable, and it's important to be realistic and find a balance that works for you.
Okay.
You don't need to overhaul your entire online life overnight.
So start small.
Exactly. Choose one or two new sources to explore, try out a different search engine, or just make a conscious effort to question your assumptions more often. Every small step you take is a step toward becoming a more informed and empowered citizen.
I love that it's about progress, not perfection.
Right.
And as we develop these information muscles,
Yeah.
we become more resilient to manipulation and more confident in our ability to navigate this complex information landscape.
Absolutely. And remember, you don't have to do this alone. Connect with others who share your passion for truth and accuracy. Join online communities, attend events, or support organizations that are fighting for a more open and transparent internet.
All right.
Share your knowledge, amplify credible voices, and hold those in power accountable.
So it's about leveraging the power of collective action to create a more informed and equitable world.
Precisely. We're all in this together. And by working together, we can make a real difference.
It's inspiring to think that we have the agency to shape the future of the internet.
You do.
You know, we can make choices that support a more open, diverse, and trustworthy online ecosystem.
That's what I hope listeners take away from this deep dive.
Yeah.
We may not be able to single-handedly change the entire system, but we can make informed choices that empower ourselves and contribute to a more informed society.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. Thank you so much for guiding us through these complex ideas and offering such practical advice.
It's been my pleasure, and remember, the quest for knowledge is a lifelong adventure. Stay curious, stay critical, and never stop exploring.
Well said. And to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep pushing for a better, more informed world.